today is with Mr. Richard Newton. We are at his home on Shears Road, and used to be Shears Chapel Road, and today is July the 19th, 2006. And Mr. Newton, we thank you for allowing us to come into your home and interview you and hear your stories about growing up in Mooresville. I know that you were born in Mooresville and you live down in what's called the Mooresville Mill Village. Can you tell us about your life down there as a child?
It's hard to know just where to start. For the better part of my life, 22 years, basically was spent in the Mill Village, there and about. I was born in what they call the Grove. That's Templeton Avenue, just off of Main Street. And we moved quite frequently. One time we lived in Cliffside for just a short period of time and came back to Mooresville. It used to be on the way to school, some of us would get to walk through the mill if it was raining. Then on Saturdays, when Daddy had to work, we'd get to go to the mill and help him, hand him tools and whatnot, like we were doing something. Basically, my knowledge of the mill came when I turned 16. I went to work in the weave room. They had 3 different kinds of looms there, 4. They had a Little Stafford, Big Stafford, Crompton Knoll, and Draper. They made towels, washcloths, and different fabric, primarily during the war years, which was about when I went. They made the fabric for pockets in uniforms. And after that, they started making denim in the other years.
When you worked there, and when you went at age 16, it was Mooresville Mills.
Mooresville Mills, right.
And then what, do you remember exactly when it became Burlington Mills?
No, I don't remember the date of that. But back in the early years, I do remember, I think I told you one time before, that when they went on strike, I was just a little fellow then, about 6 years old, and that was back in the 30s. My brother and I saw them throwing rocks, some of the strikers throwing rocks in the mill windows, and we went out to help them. We didn't know, we just thought that would be a lot of fun. And our mother called us, and she really tore us up for participating in that. Like I said, the mill was basically our life. And
the houses that you lived in were owned by the mill?
Yes. If you lived in a 4-room house, it cost you $1 a week. The mill kept up the outside appearance and kept up the plumbing if you had anything inside. But if you wanted to paint the rooms, you put in a requisition and they'd furnish you the paint and you do the work on the inside. Otherwise, they kept it painted outside, fixed all the screens, the roof, and stuff of this nature. It was adequate. It wasn't anything fancy, but at the time it was what we had. And we learned to love it and cherished it to this day.
Okay, so you said that you went to work in the mill when you were 16, and then at some point in time you left and joined the Army.
Right. Well, I worked in the different departments and was all over the mill. I made it a point to do that. I was inquisitive. If I got a spare moment, I've gone to another department, even from where they brought the cotton into the warehouse. And incidentally, Mooresville Mill played a large part in the development of rayon fibers. But they opened the bales of cotton and they had this machine that would just tear it all to pieces. Then they put it into the card machine, and that just put it into a real thin blanket of fibers and stretched them out. Then it went into a coil, a rope, about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and it curled around in this coiler head into a big tube barrel bucket. And then it went to the, I think it was the slovers that re-brought it on down to about the size of a pencil. And from there it went to the spinning frames. And they spun the filling, which was the part that went back and forth in the warp to weave the fabric, to put the crosswork members in it. The warp was a big spool that had approximately up to a couple thousand ends of thread, and that made your cloth. I say they made suiting and dress fabrics. They didn't do any printing here until later on after the war. They done some screen printing of washcloths and towels. But up until then, they just had the towel room where the women mostly did the hemming of the washcloths and the towels. The women had a uniform. Most of them wore a uniform. It was green with white collars and accent. The men almost exclusively wore overalls throughout the mill. They were cheap, they were convenient, and just a plain shirt, t-shirt, or a chambray shirt. And they made some lino. That was a fabric that had a double knot in it. And they had some that was a novelty twist. They twisted it so there'd be slubs in the filling, and it would make lumps in the fabric, which was a novelty effect. It let air in, but it broke down the monotony of just thread, thread, thread. After it came from the spinning room, some of it went to the twisters, and some went to the quillers, where they put it on quills, and some of the fibers went to the warpers. They put that on a creel and wound it on this big spool that's probably 24 to 30 inches in diameter, and that would go to the looms to make the warp. And I spent a lot of time out in the machine shop, that's where my interest was, but I never could get hired. Nobody quit. Nobody wanted to quit that job. But I always wanted to work in the machine shop.
And what did they do in the machine shop?
Repair the looms, make parts, cut gears, and stuff of this nature. Just machine the metal.
So basically the mill was self-sustaining.
It was.
They didn't have
some items they had to go out to get castings and stuff like that from foundries, and bar stock to make the gears out of, and the rods, and some of the wood parts, like picker sticks and shuttles. They had to buy those. And they put in a new department with some high-speed looms. They call that the C5 basement, for all the looms were C5s, Crompton Knoll. And that's where I met my wife. And then I was working with quality control, shading the different fabric. If it had a little too much dye in this batch when they dyed it, I would make the decision whether to hold that batch and run them all together. Then they could run that in a certain batch of looms, and all that fabric would stay together, and that way it wouldn't give you an off shade in a dress or a suit.
That's why there's differences in dye lots when you go and buy. So, for example, you go and buy a towel, and you go back and you try to buy one that matches it. It may not match it exactly.
The dye lots will not match, unless they were dyed at the same time in the same batch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went in service, and if there's any particular item you want to know about in the mill, I'll be glad to.
Well, this is interesting because I never knew anything about how the mill operated. So I think the story of what the mill was doing is really vital. If you can tell us, if you think of anything else.
Well, they had two different kinds of looms basically. One had a battery that the filling went in.
What do you mean by filling?
That's a quill of filling. It's on a spool. We've got some.
Where?
See if there's one on the mantle in there. And they'd put them in a battery, and it would go all the way around. And when it had a shoe, and when that quill run out, another one would pop another one into the shuttle and knock that one out into a waste can. Then another one that would run, that had to all be the same shade of material, same color. Then you had a box loom that you could run 4 different colors, and they would drop the filling in the different shades in the different slot and tie the end down here, and it operated the same way. And the picker stick would knock that shuttle to the other end, then the rocker arm would knock it back, and it just kept this going. Usually on a C5 it was about 400 times a minute, and I think about the most interesting job that I enjoyed more was blowing off looms. It had all this yarn, dust, cotton dust and stuff on it, for the machine was basically oily. Had to keep them oiled and greased. And when I first went there, they operated off a line shaft that was down under the mill, pulled by one big motor, and belts up through the floor to drive the looms. And then they got onto individual motors. When one of my duties when I was with quality control, if they didn't manufacture enough filling to keep that loom running all day long, at the end of the day, I would go to the section that was running that particular filling and give them so many picks, estimating how long it run. And excuse me just a minute. That was one of the best jobs. It gave you more satisfaction. It looked terrible when you started on it. By the time you blow all that old lint and stuff off and get in there and wipe it down with rags and shine it, it was one of the prettiest sights you ever seen in your life. It was a real satisfaction to get to clean that loom up and make it shine again.
Mm-hmm.
One of the real hazards was someone, well, to explain how the warp run, it was in a stand on the back of the loom. Then you had a roller that that yarn went over and into drop wires. If one of the drop wires,
that's all I could find.
okay, that's okay. If one of the drop wires had a thread going through it, well, they all did. Mm-hmm. But if that broke, that would drop down and short out the whole loom, and it would stop. Mm-hmm. Keep from making bad fabric. Then you come and tie on a new end, which was usually just a piece of thread off that same warp that they tied onto the loom. And if you had a break in, you tie that on and tie that back in and start it up again. One day I remember at lunchtime, one of the boys came in and had a quill in his hand, just hitting on the back of the loom, and broke every loom. None of them would start up. So he got a chewing for that. Another instance I remember, I don't remember it, but I remember my daddy talking about it. They came here in 1916. My grandmother, her husband died in 1906, Mary Hall Newton. And she had a baby about 3 months after he died. And she moved with 8 boys to Mooresville. And she raised those 8 boys here. And how she done it, I don't know. But basically all of them worked in the mill. Then they spread out going different places.
You were going to tell us something that your father had told you about?
Oh, yeah. He went to work when he was about 10 or 11 years old.
There were no labor laws then?
No. They lived out in the country, and he worked in the spinning room. And one particular fella would put his chew tobacco in, and when he went home for supper, he'd just go out the window, and the houses were just a short distance away. He'd take his tobacco out, put it up on a switch box, and when he'd come back in, he'd just crawl through that window and reach up and get his tobacco. Well, Daddy brought some horse manure and put in place of tobacco, and all of them got down behind the spinning frame to watch the man when he came back in. He threatened to kill whoever done that. But that's one of the fun things they had.
Oh, me. Okay, well, I'm sure that there were lots of fun stories about working in the mill, too.
Like I say, that's at the time when I was 22 and went in service. And married my sweetheart.
And when you came back, you went to Korea. That was during Korea, but you never actually went out of the country.
No, they froze me at the base. I was drawing training aids for giving classes. Whoever was giving classes, all they had to tell was what they're going to talk on, and I'd write out the key phrases they wanted and draw pictures. Well, this one colonel wanted me to re-up and go to Germany with him. The tanks we had were new ones, and they were heavy tanks, and all they were going to do was patrol the Russian border and show off what they had. And no, we wanted to come home. So he said, I want to see that you're taken care of if you're not going with me. And he got me on the general staff, the post general, and that's all I done there was drawing and being the only draftsman on the post that was qualified to do maps. I had a pretty substantial job, and I had to read maps once a month.
Now, how did you become qualified to be a draftsman and
They
read
sent me
maps?
to engineering school, and that covered topo drafting, civil engineering, mechanical, you name it. It covered everything, a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm. And so when you came back home, you went to work for the ironworks.
More ironwork, yeah. Went to work what they call a Chinese end mill, which is nothing more than a file. That's a Chinese end mill. But eventually, I graduated to a turret lathe, and from there I pretty well went all over the shop, learning everything and run every machine they had. And I had worked in a foundry before when I was a youngster, so I knew that end of it. And it just goes to show how the Lord looks after you. After I worked there and was a draftsman at Moore's Iron Works, decided to go out on my own and been further blessed ever since.
And what did you do when you went out on your own?
Well, I was going to really just do drawing for this one particular sales outfit. And we decided that one of the customers might come and see what we had, so we bought a lathe and a little milling machine and a few pieces and put them in a building. And he paid me a commission on every machine he sold that I drew up. And that was the start of it. And we manufactured quite a few machines and finally just settled down to making rollers, stainless rollers mostly.
And this was done here in Mooresville?
Right out.
Right out here in your little machine shop?
Stainless tubing is a special tube. It's called textile roll tubing. It's highly polished. It's ground and straightened. And I guess half a dozen different manufacturers tried to make it and could never do it successfully or to make the profit that they wanted. So we found a place that we could get it, and they manufactured it for us. They can manufacture about 10 feet of regular tubing while they're running 1 foot of this tubing, so it's really expensive. Mm-hmm. But it's the only thing that'll do the job, with the threads running over it, and it been dyed. That dye will transfer to get out in the pores of the metal. Mm-hmm. If it's not polished. Then the next batch you run, that dye will transfer to the fabric you're running.
He's a smart man.
It's obvious. It's obvious he's a smart man. Okay, now another thing that we know that you have done is that you have painted pictures of landmarks here in Mooresville.
Yeah.
How'd you get started doing that?
Well, I've always drawn. My mother didn't allow us to play ball and stuff like this on Sunday, and I'd sneak off with my drawing pad and pencils under my shirt and go down in the woods so I wouldn't get teased, and do sketching and drawing, and put that back in my shirt and come back home, and the rest of them still playing ball, but we didn't get to play ball and stuff like that on Sunday. And basically, I decided when our first daughter was going to college that I had to earn some more money. And I thought, well, I'll paint some pictures and get some prints made and see if I can go that route. And put 3 girls through college with a paintbrush.
Okay, now.
Basically.
What are, can you tell us the places that are no longer existing that you have painted?
Oh, gracious.
I know South School, Parkview,
yeah.
Central High School.
South School, Central
A lot
High.
of churches.
Oh, yeah, a lot of churches. Old ARP Church and Mount Horn School.
What about the old St. Mark's Lutheran that was
The
on
what?
St. Mark's Lutheran that was on the corner of Main and Institute?
Yeah.
You did
Yeah.
did that one?
Done that one. Mm-hmm.
What about
No, that was on the corner. It was a brick building.
Mm-hmm.
It was right in front of the Oddfellers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't do that one.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because nobody ever wanted it or commissioned me to do it, you know. Done approximately 25 churches in the area here in Charlotte and Davidson, Cornelius, Huntersville, for a funeral home, Almond, Raymer, and McConnell in Huntersville. people would come in. Well, they started out there were 3 of them, and they wanted their home churches painted. By the time I done those, people come in to view bodies. Where's a picture of my church? Well, if you won't pay for it, we'll get it for you. And that's the way it went about it. And I'd have smaller prints made and sell those.
Did you just sell them here out of your house?
Mostly. And
By word of mouth?
some out, used to sell some out of the depot. I haven't been to the depot lately. And out at Landmark Gallery. And what's the name of that in Davidson? One place in Davidson. Can't think of the name of it right now.
What about, have you done any of the old stores that used to be down in the mill area, or anything related to the mill?
No, I'm going to start on that at my next project. I think I had referred to the fact there were 16 grocery stores from Broad Street Church south at the time when I was a kid, but there was really 18. I thought of 2 more. And at the time, you only had to walk a short distance to get your groceries. And lack of refrigeration, people didn't keep meat and stuff like that unless it was hogs they killed and cured the meat. Now we had cured meat, and we had chickens on the hoof, and 2 of them would leave us every Saturday. And they'd really get hit on Sunday.
That was your Sunday dinner.
Yeah. But eggs and stuff we had, and our own pork. We didn't have a cow. We tied one out for a family that did have one, and they gave us half gallon milk a day, and that was just one good gulp. With 8 kids.
8 kids.
And Mom and Daddy, a lot of times Grandma and Grandpa. I don't dare tell her about Grandpa, do I?
No.
It's not that bad.
Okay, you have really piqued my curiosity now.
Well, one of the times when, you can cut it out if you want to. One of the times.
I'll turn it. All right, tell us about your family.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how it was in school. Being from a poor family, Daddy was probably making $12 a week with 8 kids. Maybe gone to 18, 20. Incidentally, I started working the mill 37.5 cents an hour. Can you imagine? And when I came out of service, I was making 75 cents an hour at Morris Line Work. In service, I made $27 a month. And Bad Joe got 119. So it's been poor mouth all the way. But particularly going to school, I never would badger my daddy for money. I figured he knew from the rest of them telling him that I needed it too. But there was always something to take it. And I've gone with him, walk to town on payday, and he'd go in a store and tell him he didn't have the money this week, but he'd try to catch it up next week. He would walk that mile to tell him that he didn't have it. He wouldn't run from him. And that was an early trait that I desired and hope I developed. But getting back to the school, we had a 50 cents a year book fee. Why, I don't know, but our old dear old North State couldn't afford that 50 cents for our book. And I never had it. I never did get up that 50 cents. So after school was out, I didn't get a report card until I come back to school and worked about 3 days carrying the books from all the classrooms into the libraries and inspecting them, see if they were torn, put them in one pile, if they were good, put them in another pile. And when I was through, they would give me my report card, which I thought was cruel. And when the rest of the classes, a little magic show would come to the school, or a skit, a play or something, I never did have the nickel to attend, and there was usually 3 or 4 in the whole room, the whole class, school, that couldn't afford it. So they put us in one room by ourselves. And this day, if I hear of a kid wanting to go somewhere and ain't got the money, we will provide it. We will do that. For you don't know how it made you feel. All the rest of them come back talking about how great that was, and all you could do was shake your shoulders. And that really marked me. When everybody else had it, I never had a school picture. Never could afford a picture. There's one fellow had told me he had school pictures that I could get a copy of. Well, he died, and I haven't gotten around to seeing his wife to see if she'd want to depart with him. That's just about where I'm coming from. Now, something else might bring up something else, I don't know, but that's where we are.
Well, it's obvious that you that kind of background made you strive to make your life better.
Oh, sure.
And to provide better for your own children.
Sure. And I hope we have. They don't have all they have what they want, everything they want, but none of them are going hungry.
Tell us about your children.
We got 5 beautiful children and 7 grandchildren. We love them all.
See all their pictures on the wall back there.
And we got a bunch over here. But
I'm going to stop here. Mr. Newton, tell us about this A model.
Well, it's one I've always liked, and we have one. It's always been one of my favorite cars. This is a 1930 model. We have an original one that's running, and wife always wanted one that was the same age and vintage as she is. And people inquire, why? Well, she just wanted something as old as she was and see which one was in the best shape. And they asked me which one's in the best shape. I said, I'm not telling.
But you carved this
Yeah,
model.
I carved this from basically a log, out of a log house. Chopped it up, and it's white pine. It whittles easy, pretty good. I made a roller and took it to Salisbury to get rubber put on it. Then I cut the tires and made the wheels to fit it. And incidentally, the spokes were quite a problem to get made, but I finally figured it out. They were made out of 90 thousandths aluminum welding rods. And the rubber was just like a rubber covered roller. I've still got some of it to make me a model truck someday. It'll be just this much. Then my collection will be complete. Mm-hmm. That's basically it. Outside of it, looking at the backside, it's kind of damaged. One of the grandsons decided he wanted to try to ride it, and he climbed on the back of it and broke the bumpers off.
Well, that's a magnificent specimen of work. It's absolutely remarkable.
I enjoy doing stuff like that.
Okay, another thing that I have seen here in your house are stained glass windows. Now tell us about those stained glass windows.
Well, those came out of Central Methodist Church. When they built the new church, they stored these windows in the basement of the new building, and Joe Thompson was put in charge of disposing. His wife Virginia told Betty Joe that she knew where this was stained glass, and I met Joe up there, and he showed me the glass. I asked him how many can I have. He says you can have them all if you want them. No, I won't do that. I'll leave some for somebody else. But I got 3 of the long ones, and one of the big round one was a commemorative window for Dr. Trivett, one of the first Methodist ministers in this area. It's donated to Broad Street Church. These 3, we had to cut them down. We cut them about half and reworked them and spent about a month each rebuilding them. And we scraped the paint on an angle, and to differentiate between the layers of paint and the dust, there were 14 coats of white paint put on the outside of those windows from the time they were installed till they were taken out. 14 coats of paint. And that's basically it.
We still have the bottom half of them. 3 of them. But I always wanted, I said, when we were going to do that, I said, I want to have a piece of stained glass in. And we had the round piece, but Richard wanted to put it in, but I thought this would be about enough. And
this room was a back porch and a carport. And we got the chestnut lumber up the mountains and added the room.
Okay, I'll add some pictures of the room and the stained glass windows in a few minutes. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about?
Well, we'll talk all day about something, but
well, we certainly do appreciate this, and if we think of something else, we'll come back to you. Okay?
Okay.
Your quilts.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a quilter.
Okay, you go get your quilts while I take the pictures of the stained glass, and we'll. These are the stained glass windows in Mr. Newton's home. You can see the point at the top, which is certainly indicative that they were in a church at some point in time. There are 3 of them. And also in between are some of his paintings. Wait a minute. Okay. All right, Ms. Newton, tell us about this picture.
The picture, they were bringing the tank into Mooresville. My granddaddy, and there was my daddy, and I don't know where my granddaddy was. Somebody was up here. There were about 6 or 8 horses to the wagon to bring it in from Statesville.
They brought it in from Statesville, and what was it? It was a fuel tank?
Fuel.
I guess it was the first fuel tank that came into town to be put underground.
And this was probably sometime in the 20s? 1920s?
20s.
Yes, it would have been about that time.
So what did your granddaddy do?
He was a jack of all trades.
So, okay.
He liked to do big things.
Okay.
And
he cleared land right of ways.
Yes. And he had lots of horses. I've forgotten how many horses there are. There was 8
horses there.
Horses pulling.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to stop. All right. This is a picture of Hickory Hill School.
It's where you turn to go back to Mount Morn. It was there.
Faith Road.
Corner of Faith and Sharon.
And I can remember vaguely when when it was real old. And that was a school, and my aunts and uncles went to that school.
Did your father go there also?
Well, then my uncle I know is there, and several other people that were in the neighborhood. And it was Hickory Hill School.
And
it's interesting. Mrs. Winfield Owens lives back in here behind us. Always a good note. And Mother said they lived down close to Shara Church, and said that a lot of the children would come across Miss Owens'
property?
And get mud on their feet and go across her porch, because she'd like to keep her porch
When it was raining.
clean. And they did that. Mother said it just...
Do you have any idea what years this might be?
That's about 80. That would be about
the early 1900s.
1920.
Before 1920 or
just about that time.
Okay.
Because as I can remember...
Cisco was about 90 years old. I'm going 06, that would make him 16. Early 20s. And the pony. Tell her about the pony.
Oh, yes.
Patsy.
Patsy. Well, I guess that probably would have been Patsy's mother. That my granddaddy always had lots of horses. He had big old strong horses. And I can remember if he had one that he liked in particular and was a strong horse, and if he got mad at him, he would get a hold of his bridle reins and just run like a pendulum to get the horse to stay down and do what he wanted to do.
Well, these
We're talking about Patsy's mother. This pony was Patsy's. They had a pony named Patsy. When this pony died, they had a young colt, and they brought it in the house and fed it with a bottle, day in and day out. And it was still living. It had a colt back in the 50s or 60s, and it hadn't been too long. It was gone. But they had that lineage all the way through, just about for 60, 70 years.
Wow, that's great. Oh, this is a great picture. Thank you for sharing with us.
The buggy.
They rode that to school in the
Yes, Mother or Daddy and them lived about a mile down here, or a little more than a mile.
Yeah.
Down on Johnson.
Miss Newton is a quilter. This is one of her quilts that she has in one of her bedrooms. Is this the quilt that was sent into the
no, this is the one.
This is the quilt that was sent in for the judging for Good Housekeeping and Land's End?
Yes.
That's beautiful. That's white on white. This quilt was sent by Mrs. Newton for the national judging, is that correct?
Yes.
For Good Housekeeping and also for Land's End. Very intricate work in this quilt. You are talented also.
Cover.
This is a round quilt, which really she says she uses as a round table cover. Richard, we didn't talk about the painting process, how you actually do the paintings. Your house is full of paintings of different churches that you've done. So how did you do this?
Well, as most people that have ever done it will tell you, watercolor is very difficult. It has a mind of its own. You take a brush with water in it and a piece of paper, and you put the two of them together. There's no telling which way it's going if you just touch it, unless you control it. It's very meticulous to control. Basically, start out with, you have to know what you're going to do before you do it. It's sort of like Michelangelo and that stone. You got to see it there before you can do it. You start with the least vivid part, and you come forward, you get darker. The values, you start out with nothing. Whatever you're going to leave white, you leave it white. But a vivid white will not. It just don't go. Always paint a little bit of light blue to kill that vivid white, and then you work yourself forward. Wherever you see that it needs to be a little darker on this color, it's going to come out a little darker than the next one. You work yourself forward till you get to the darkest part. Then if you got one you want to frame, you frame it. If you don't, you throw it away.
Did you work from photographs or from your own sketches?
Both mainly. Well, that's the only thing I've ever had time to do. Sometimes it takes up to a month to complete one. And when you put that, when it's wet, unless you're doing a wet on wet, you have to wait for it to dry before you touch it again. And you got to realize what that bottom color is going to do to the top color. It will diffuse, it'll blend with the next color you're putting on. You pretty well need to know what you're doing before you start. That's about all I can tell you.
So all the intricate details of, say, the schools were all done with watercolor.
Watercolor, opaque watercolor, translucent.
Okay, well did you take classes to learn how to do this?
I went to Charlotte and took classes with Al Fincher, if you want to call it classes. I had never done watercolor, didn't know the first thing about them, and I contacted him and he said, yeah, he'd be glad to show me. Back in 1976, when we had our bicentennial, he went to every county in North Carolina and painted the courthouse or some prominent feature in that particular county. And that's how I got to know what he liked. I liked what he done, and I wanted to copy that style as close as I could. So I contacted him and he agreed to help me. And I went several months with him, once a week, a couple hours. And several more people in Mooresville went to him. It's interesting.
Well, it's certainly. Go ahead.
If you don't do anything with it, get you some watercolors and play with them.
That's one talent I don't have.
But like a lady told me one time, said, you stick to landscapes and buildings. I believe she was with North Carolina Watercolor Society. Says there's thousands of women sitting at their kitchen table painting flowers. You don't need to paint flowers. Don't waste your time.
Oh, well, one of the things that the museum is so appreciative of, at least I am as a representative of the museum, is the fact that you have captured many of the old landmarks in Mooresville that no longer exist.
Right.
And that is a blessing for us to have those pictures of those buildings.
Well, if you've got an old photograph of any kind that'll show me the basic structure, I like to be a visual historian.
That's what you are.
That's what I are. That's what Lynn Sullivan used to say. That's what you are. Visual historian. I could reconstruct it if you can pretty well tell me what the colors were. Like the old depot, Mr. Baker's daddy ran the depot for years, but he only had one photograph of it back before it burned, or they tore it down in 1923. So I took that old photograph and copied it, used it for a copy, but nobody knew the colors. I I went for months with everybody in this town that knew anything about it, and more people came up with those colors that I put on it. But nobody knew exactly. One said it was gray, the other said it was green. So that's what I decided on. As far as I know, that's accurate.
Well, that's as I say, your talent has been used to capture the history of Mooresville, and we certainly do appreciate that.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, thank you so much for this interview, both you and Ms. Newton, for her quilts and all the many things that you have here in your house. We so appreciate it. Thank you.